Next on News Talk, AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show with Kevin Doran.
Brian O'Neill in for Kevin Doran again on the phone with Hornell Deputy Mayor and Hornell GOP Leader John Buckley. John, thank you for calling in.
Thanks for having me on, Brian.
So I'm going to be talking today about national, state, county, local Hornell issues today. Starting out with local, John, you've got a town hall meeting with at the Hornell VFW. Thursday night, it'll be filled with local law enforcement talking about the drug problem. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this town hall is actually something I've been wanting to do for quite some time. The topic is the drug problem that we're facing in the area. It's not just unique to Hornell. It's all the surrounding towns and villages and in upstate New York. But we've assembled a panel. We've got Sheriff Dave Cole will be on the panel. Brooks Baker, our district attorney. We've got Captain Kevin O'Reilly from the state police who will be joining us on the panel, along with Chief Ted Murray and lead investigator Tom Ianni from the Hornell Police Department, and also my fellow aldermen Jim Bassage and Norman McComsky, who do a lot of work on the Prevention Coalition. So we've got an expert panel assembled, and we're doing that from all different aspects, from gateway drugs with the youth and the children. We're talking about marijuana and things like that. And I expect Brooks Baker and Dave Cole and Captain Riley to really get into some of the harder hitting drugs like heroin and meth and bath salts. You hear a lot about bath salts these days, and that's one that's unfortunately been on the rise in the area. So we're going to approach it. We're going to identify what the problems are, where they're coming from, and then we're going to talk about what we're doing to combat the problems.
Wondering, John, will Norm McComsky be possibly addressing medical marijuana? I guess he has some opinions on that issue.
I know he has opinions on the issue. I know he has some pretty deep reservations about it. As far as this town hall goes, I think his focus will mainly be on just the marijuana in the traditional sense as a gateway drug. I don't know that he'll get into the medical marijuana. Obviously, for the listeners out there, that was legalized by the New York State Legislature this past year. But we're going to be talking about a wide range of issues, all having to do with drugs, from youth right on through adults, enforcement aspects, partnerships between the sheriff's department, the state police, the local PDs. So there's a lot of information we're going to get out to the public, and like I said, it's open to the general public. So anyone interested, welcome to attend. It's Thursday night at the Hornell VFW on Canisteel Street. It starts at 6 p.m. and will probably go till 8 p.m. So come on down. If you can't get there right at 6, don't worry about it. Come on in anyway and join in, and we'll have a question and answer period as well. People have questions, feel free to ask, and we'll pass the microphone around.
John, also another Hornell issue we wanted to touch on, the Hornell sales tax going to Steuben County. Kind of a complicated plan there. Now, Hornell gets $200,000 over 5 years, $80,000 the first year, $60,000 the second year, $40,000 the third year, $20,000 the fourth year. Can you give us a sense of, why the council wanted to do this?
The gist of it is this is going to help the county with the 2% sales cap that they have to abide by. And, before, it has to do with preemption. Certain municipalities could preempt their sales tax. What this does is it basically locks everyone in, and so they're all in the same boat for, it's a 5-year contract, basically, a 5-year agreement. So what does that mean for Hornell? Well, it means for Hornell that we'll be getting some money up front, and it starts at $80,000 the first year, and it goes down the next few years. So basically, what the county did was they gave us an incentive, and they're basically sweetening the pot. And so in a nutshell, it's good for Hornell. It increases our revenues, and at the end of the 5-year plan, or the 5-year agreement, rather, we can take a look at it, and we can decide if we want to opt back in or opt out at that time. But then, for the next 5 years, I think it's a great plan. We went over all the numbers in the Finance Committee, and then revisited the numbers in the Common Council. I know there was a couple little tweaks in some of the verbiage, but it's definitely a good plan, and again, it'll help the county out as far as their 2% tax cap. It'll kind of lock them in and us as well.
Moving on to state issues, an issue that WLEA really has not done a lot with. There was an Rob Astorino family photo, probably on Facebook. I'm not sure about that, but anyway, there was a Astorino photo online with Rob Astorino standing with his young son at a Miami's Dolphins game. Governor Andrew Cuomo used that photo of the Astorinos at a Dolphins game for a TV commercial that tied in Cuomo with the Buffalo Bills. I guess the theme of the commercial was that the governor was pro-Buffalo and that Astorino was not. The commercial edited out the Astorino child from the photo. So since then, the Astorino camp has come out, and even Astorino's 10-year-old son has come out and say, "Why did you edit me out of the picture?" Now, John, is it just me or both the Dems and Republicans being a little bit silly on this one?
Well, it is an election year, so that means silly season is upon us. I look at it this way. Andrew Cuomo can't really run on the issues. Is he going to run on job creation? No. Is he going to run on taxes? No. We have the highest taxes in the nation. Is he going to run on education? No. We have Common Core. So, if you're Andrew Cuomo, how do you go after this guy? Well, you can't go after his record because he has an outstanding record as a Westchester County executive. So you have to take these personal cheap shots and try to, make them look silly. In this case, try to, make them look like a Miami Dolphins fan and and run the edge where most of the Buffalo Bills fans are. So it's really silly.
I think on both sides, I could have done without the Astorino kid coming on and saying, "Why did you edit me out of the picture?"
Yeah, well, you could make the argument there too. If I were Astorino, I wouldn't have involved my kid. But you could, at the same time, you could say Cuomo, did that by cutting him out of the commercial. But really, if you're a voter, if you're someone who's paying attention to this, look at the issues.
That was not the deciding issue.
When you go to the polls, look at the issues. Look where the candidates stand on job creation, on taxes, on the SAFE Act, on Common Core. Look at the issues. Don't just ignore this nonsense.
Reuters came out within the last week criticizing the governor for trying to over-manipulate the media. There was a story on that. The name of the story was a blog from a Reuters reporter. It was called "Just How Strange is Governor Andrew Cuomo?" Kind of leading there. But, John, do you notice how the media seems to prefer Teach Out to Cuomo?
I have noticed that, and, the reason being, at least in my opinion, is because the media, at least the mainstream media, leans so far left. And Zephyr Teachout was even left of Cuomo, which, for a conservative Republican, it's pretty hard to fathom. But she was. So I think the media kind of embraced her to a certain extent. The Gannett Press and some of the TV stations, especially downstate. But it wasn't really a surprise to me, I guess, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. On the governor's victory over Zephyr Teachout's campaign in last week's primary, your take on Teachout getting half the counties in New York State, not half the state, but half the counties.
Yeah, that is interesting to a degree. I mean, one thing you have to consider in a Democratic primary like that, I think what the turnout was roughly, 10%? I don't know if you have the numbers in front of you.
I don't, but I heard that from Mayor Hogan.
Yeah, it was roughly 10%. I think it was. So you have one out of every 10 registered Democrats bothered to go out to vote. So you have a very low voter turnout for that. And the people that do vote in primaries are usually the people that are highly energized. And so it doesn't surprise me that she won half the counties. There's some Democrats out there that honestly don't think Andrew Cuomo is liberal enough. I know personally in Hornell, and I don't know how far this spreads, but there are actually some conservative Democrats that purposefully voted against Cuomo because they don't like Cuomo, and they thought that if Teachout somehow beat Cuomo, that would give Astorino a leg up. So there's different dynamics at work, but at the end of the day, Cuomo won the primary. So it's fun to kind of kick it around, but at the end, much ado about nothing.
How about Teachout saying she'll endorse Cuomo if the governor comes out and says he's anti-fracking officially?
Well, if you're Teachout, where do you go? I mean, it's either Astorino. Well, I guess there's the Green Party candidate Hawkins. He's been in it the last couple of elections. But if you're Zephyr Teachout, you're going to naturally gravitate towards Andrew Cuomo. Republicans, Democrats, they both do that after primaries. They try to basically coalesce around the candidate that wins. And, that's nothing new. You see that, statewide races or, national races as well.
We're talking with Hornell Deputy Mayor, Republican 9th Ward Alderman John Buckley. We'll be back with John in just a moment. Back on the Newsmaker Show, Brian O'Neill in for Kevin Doran on the phone with Hornell Deputy Mayor John Buckley. John, thank you for joining us. Now on to national issues. The Huffington Post reports that a top Obama aide says that it is not the case that President Barack Obama has changed on his strategy. It's the case that ISIS changed their strategy, and that's why the president is talking now about putting troops on the ground in Iraq. National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes is quoted as saying that the situation did change from June to July, and it did change from July all the way to September, and that the ambitions of ISIS seem to grow with their advance. John Buckley, your thoughts on the president's, I guess you'd say, evolving view?
Well, first of all, let's be perfectly clear on one thing. The president has no strategy. He has no strategy. One day you listen to the news and he's talking about arming the rebels in Syria. He's just talking about that the other day, as a matter of fact. And honestly, that's laughable because what are you going to do? You're going to take United States arms, weapons and ammunition, and give them to these so-called moderate Syrian rebels that are going to fight ISIS. Well, how are we going to train these people? It took years for us to train the Iraqi army, and look how that worked out. Didn't work out so well. So are you telling me we're going to take these weapons and ammunition and train these moderate Syrian rebels in, 4 or 5 months, and somehow miraculously they're going to be able to fight the enemy and coordinate with United States air power? It just doesn't work out that way. Anyone that knows anything about it will tell you that it can't work. I think what you have here, Brian, is the ISIS or ISIL or whatever we're calling them this week, because it seems to change every other week. The problem just kind of snowballed. I think Obama is one of these guys who didn't really want to get mired down in in these Middle East conflicts. The American public was kind of tired of it coming out of the Bush years, and I think President Obama wanted to avoid that. But in doing so, created a huge vacuum by pulling troops out too early, in my opinion. You can make the argument that we should have never been there, or we should have been there. The fact is, we were there. He did set up timelines and basically told the enemy when we were pulling out, and did that. And the other thing is, you don't tell the enemy what you won't do, and he's done that time and time again. You've heard him on newscasts and press conferences saying, the United States won't do this. We will not commit, boots on the ground. We won't do this. We won't do that. Well, you never tell the enemy what you won't do, because if you tell them you're not going to do something, well, you're not going to do it, and then they'll just, keep doing what they're doing. But yeah, the short of it is he has no strategy. I think the public is really, really starting to take notice of this. We've had the beheadings, 3 beheadings now in the last few weeks, That just sends a horrible message. You even have, in some cases, Westerners. I think the last beheading was a British-born citizen that was recruited by ISIS. So it's really a horrible situation. There's no easy answers, but unfortunately, the president has not shown any leadership whatsoever on this.
John, in somewhat of an ironic turn of events, a very popular YouTube show, the progressive show called The Young Turks, which used to be on MSNBC, he came out in favor of Rand Paul over Hillary Clinton on this issue.
So if you've got Rand Paul running on a let's stop messing around in the Middle East because we're getting killed and it's doing absolutely no good for us campaign, versus Hillary Clinton, let's keep doing the same stupid shit that we were doing before that you hated before campaign. If I was a betting man, and I am, and if there was a site where I could bet on politics, and there used to be, by the way, you want to talk about invincible, never lost a single political bet in my life, okay? Not one. Even one that were 4-1 against me, okay? I wish that site was still around, because right now I'd lay money on Rand Paul being the next president of the United States.
John, a major liberal there, Cenk Uygur of Young Turks, coming out in favor of Rand Paul over Hillary on the issue of war. Your thoughts on that, John Buckley?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because, as you had mentioned, the Young Turks started on MSNBC, which is, just off the rails liberal. One could argue that they're just a mouthpiece for the White House on a lot of issues. So that is interesting, but it does sound like it's just that one issue that really has them up in arms, and that's the Middle East. And honestly, Hillary Clinton has been more hawkish than Rand Paul. Rand Paul, I think, is correct on a lot of issues. I'm not crazy about his foreign policy. Anyone that remembers when his father was running for president, he had some some pretty kooky ideas on foreign policy, and if they were ever implemented, it'd just be disastrous for us and for Israel. So, on this one issue, I think Rand Paul is wrong. You can't just ignore problems. Sometimes you don't have the perfect solution to every problem. Sometimes, you look back into the Reagan years. Sometimes you had to, pick you have two bad guys. Well, which one's worse? And you pick the lesser of two evils sometimes, and that's happened throughout history. The Middle East. What do you do? I don't know. There are no easy answers, but you can't ignore it. You can't ignore threats, and when threats do arise, you have to tackle them head on.
John, down to just a couple of minutes here. U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand said recently that Congress might investigate the NFL and have hearings about the Baltimore Ravens and the NFL's handling of the Ray Rice situation and the video, even possibly congressional hearings. Gillibrand also says the NFL has to develop a zero-tolerance policy for this sort of thing.
Yeah, I think Congress should stay out of the NFL's business. Quite honestly, I think Congress has better things to do. Hey, maybe tackle the situation on the border. How about that? Or maybe the corruption in the IRS. Or maybe get to the truth on the Benghazi issue when we got dead Americans. I think Congress should spend more time actually doing what they're supposed to be doing than meddling in the NFL and Major League Baseball and some of these other things that they've tried to meddle in over the years.
Hornell Republican leader, Hornell Deputy Mayor, 9th Ward Alderman, wears a lot of hats there, John Buckley. He's going to be having an anti-drug Hornell Town Hall at the Hornell VFW. It starts at 6 o'clock Thursday night.
6 o'clock, yes. We'll see you then, Brian. Thank you very much.
And thanks for joining us today on the Newsmaker Show on AM 1480 WLEA Hornell.